Aloha and welcome to Conversations to Enlighten and Heal. I'm your host, KG Stiles. Today I'm excited to be speaking with Cayelin Castell. Cayelin is a renowned shamanic astrologer and teacher, co-founder of the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School. Cayelin teaches live events as well as online classes worldwide. On today's show, Cayelin will talk about Venus' return to the morning sky after her journey in the underworld. She will exactly conjunct her lover Mars on August 31st and then again on November 2nd. This is truly a rare event, what we're experiencing during these times. So after the show, Cayelin will stay on to answer questions if anyone is here. We had to drop off our other cast of the show. I guess Google was having technical difficulties. So the Q&A window is open. So if anyone does join us, please feel free to interact with us during the show. Please join me in welcoming my guest, Cayelin Castell. Welcome to the show, Cayelin. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, KG, and it's been kind of fun navigating the technical difficulties with that, but I'm glad that we figured it out and we're here and we can rock and roll.
Yes, it's been a true collaboration of the heart, no doubt. So today is a powerful 8/8 day, and it reactivates the triple infinity time gateway we are currently in. We're excited to hear insights and wisdom from you and share with us about this 6.5-year cyclic journey of love as portrayed in numerous mythic love stories such as Rapunzel and Inanna and Dumuzi. Venus just returned to the morning sky, I think it was the 22nd, something like that, when she started becoming visible again. And she's now visible up in the morning sky. So all right, I'm going to give it to you, Cayelin, and ask questions. You've got a slideshow presentation for us, and if that's okay, you can check in periodically with me to see if there are any questions if anyone happens to join us. So,
yes, and feel free to interrupt me if I'm on a roll.
Okay. Okay.
Right? Yeah, okay. That's awesome.
Okay.
It's a very exciting time, and not only is there is a pattern that Venus and Mars come together in a certain way every 6.5 years, but they aren't always in the same part of the sky. So but every 32 years they will be in the same part of the sky. So the last time Venus and Mars came together in this pattern was 32 years ago in 1983. Well, actually it started 1982, 1983, and then we started this pattern in 2014.
That's when I became a mother.
Oh,
and moved to Ashland, Oregon, and I mean there was a lot that changed right then. So it's
me too. I had my first baby in 1982 in this process. So that's one of the reasons I've been very fascinated by looking at this as well. So it's pretty cool. So we're going to look at that pattern, we'll look at the 6.5-year pattern, the 32-year pattern we're going to focus more on. There's actually 3 patterns. Well, I'll mention a little bit about the other 2, but we're going to focus on the one we're in. And we'll also focus a little bit on what's going on with Venus and Mars and how this dance right now is significant and how we can work with it in a personal way. So it's really exciting to do that. So what I'm going to do is activate my screen share and my slideshow. So let's see, I'll do that. Here we go. Screen share and share. Can you see it?
Yes, I can.
Yay! Technology that works. We love it. Okay, so this is, I called this the Sacred Union of Venus and Mars in 2015 because this is really about how they dance together and kind of how we can also work with them together when we're understanding what their dance is, and we can tune into that. Of course, we can always, this is part of what we love to do in shamanic astrology, is create a more direct experience of that. So I'm going to give you a little background on the Mars cycle and a little background on the Venus cycle and then how the 2 interact. But if you understand why there's a big difference between the 2 cycles. So the Mars cycle lasts about 25 months. It's kind of average time for it. or 779.9 days. We can round that up to 780 days. So it's almost, you know, it's a little over 2 years that Mars will be in a specific cycle. So, and what we're talking about a cycle here is from the, it's a term called acronychal rise, or the rise of Mars as the sun sets. So when Mars is opposite the sun, the cycle begins. And the reason we pick this place to begin the Mars cycle is because Mars is brightest and closest to the Earth and most stunning, and also in the sky all night long. So it's pretty amazing time to begin a cycle. And then we look at how Mars returns to the same area of the sky approximately every 15 to 17 years. There'll be a Mars cycle, and we'll see this a little bit more coming along as we go through the slides. But the Mars returns that happen in a person's life are closest to age 15, 47, and 79. And these cycles are a good 2 years, you know, anywhere from 24 to 26 months, with the average being around 25 months. So you can see this beautiful pattern that Mars makes in the sky, of where it's like going in opposition to the sun, and it's kind of creating this sacred geometry pattern in the sky. And here's just another perspective, or another way of looking at when Mars is reaching opposition to the sun, and how it does it every couple of years. And as it goes through different, it's like in different parts of the sky, it's creating this very beautiful sacred geometry pattern that's different than the pattern that Venus makes. Venus makes a 5-pointed star pattern in the sky. And her cycle lasts about 19 months. And we look at the beginning of the Venus cycle when she rises as a morning star, which happened on August 22nd, when she gets about 10 degrees from the sun. And her cycle lasts 583.92 days, or we round it up to 584 days. And Venus, in 8 years, will go through 584-day cycles, and then comes back to a starting point. We'll see that also. I'm going to illustrate that again in a little bit, but just to see that. And that Venus and Mars will return together in this, you know, so their starting point to come back together. Mars takes 15 years to get back to a starting point. Venus takes 8 years to get back to a starting point. And around 32 years is when they come back to a starting point together, which is a fascinating pattern we'll see more of in a moment, actually, in this very next slide. So this is showing the current pattern that we're in, and the 32 years prior, and the 32 years before that, and the 32 years before that. So something to know is that in 1918, 1950, 1982, and 2014, Mars was at opposition very near to the same place in the sky. It shifts off a few degrees. It's not always exactly, but it's pretty close. And in 1919, Mars rose up in the sign of in Virgo. And then in 1952, 83, and 2015, and also in 2046, the next time, 32 years from now, Mars was rising at opposite the sun in the sign of Libra. So that's pretty amazing to note that pattern, to note that there's that 32-year pattern. And then Venus was in 1918 and 1950, she began her cycle in Aquarius. In 1982 and 2014, and also in 2046, she'll begin her cycle in Capricorn. So what we're seeing in the circles here on this slide is that the time when Venus and Mars were together in the morning sky, and the date range. So we're not looking at the exact points. These dates are not the exact points. What they are is they're representing the time when Venus and Mars are within 10 degrees of each other. And they stay within 10 degrees of each other for a long time, for about 4 months. Yeah. And this is the specific pattern that repeats every 32 years, and actually it does every 6.5 years too, but not in the same part of the sky. They'll be in different signs when that happens. So it's pretty fascinating, and there's a lot of insight that we can get about this, and we'll talk a little bit more about, kind of how we've been perceiving this from the shamanic astrology perspective, what it means and how we can work with that. But just to give you that kind of background of this 32-year pattern. This is also just another way of seeing, how Venus and Mars create a different pattern in the sky. So in 2014, Venus rose as a morning star in Capricorn. In 2014, Mars was opposite the Sun in Libra, and that'll happen again in 2029, when Mars will be rising up in Libra, and then we can follow that path. So Venus in Capricorn then goes to Venus rising in Leo, which she just did in 2015, in August of 2015. And then in March 31st, I think, of 2017, Venus rises in Aries. And then in 2018, Venus is going to rise at like 29 degrees Libra. And then in 2020, Venus rises in Gemini. And then in 2022, it will rise again in Capricorn. So you can see that 8-year pattern of when it returns back. Every 8 years will return back to the same part of the sky. So Mars is similar, except that it's a longer period of time, and it's moving into new signs every 2 years. And it's actually, in the pattern that it is currently, it's skipping. So it goes from Libra to Sagittarius. That'll happen next year, May 22nd of 2016. Mars will be opposite the Sun in May, so it will be in Sagittarius. And it will be early degrees of Sagittarius. And then in 2018, it'll be in Aquarius. And then in October of 2020, it'll be in Aries. And then in December of 2022, it'll be in Gemini. And then in 2025, it'll be in Cancer, and then Virgo in 2027, and then back to Libra in 2029, in March of 2029. So it's going to take that one back to a starting. So that's cool to see, like the visual. I love the visual to get the sense of how, and then that the fact that they actually do come together, even though their patterns are so completely different. So that, that also brings to mind this idea that the masculine.
May I ask a question?
Yes, yes.
I think it's interesting that it's like am I getting, I just think it's interesting that it looks like one is like a 5. Venus is a 5-pointed star, and
yeah. Mars
is making 7.
Right. It's 7. There's 7 Mars cycles for it to return to a starting point. And 5 Venus cycles for it to return to a starting point. So one is 779 days, and the other is 584 days. And so that, of course, they're making a different pattern. Also, Venus will skip. Whereas Mars is making more of a, like, going from not always to the next sign. It's often skipping a couple of signs. Sometimes it'll skip several signs. Sometimes it'll go right into the next sign. Its pattern shifts all the time. But this is what's happening over the next few years with Mars.
Well, it's been what I noticed last time. I mean, is this true? Seems that Mars, it seems like Mars enters and does a retrograde in the sign where Saturn just left. That's what yeah. And so it's kind of like Saturn goes through and restructures an area of your life. And then as it leaves, Mars comes in there and reactivates it, re-energizes it. And then if there's anything that needs to get the boot, when it retrogrades, it'll get the boot.
Right.
Anything you're holding on to that you haven't let go of, Mars will give it the boot when it does that retrograde. And
well, you're noticing something.
We have a retrograde Mars coming up, don't we?
Yes, that's the one that's going to happen in the new cycle.
It's in Scorpio, where Saturn is just leaving, right?
Right.
And the last time it did the same thing in Libra. Where Saturn was.
Saturn's just re-entering Sagittarius, but it doesn't always work that way.
Okay.
So just noticing something very interesting, because it just so happens that right now that the Mars cycle is calibrating with the Saturn cycle.
Yeah.
And as it's shifting into new signs, but actually, because Saturn usually takes 2.5 years to pass through a sign, and the Mars cycle is about 25 months, they don't always line up like this.
Yeah.
It just so happens that it's working that way right now.
It seems like a good way for it to work.
It does seem that way. Yes.
Not that it's, you know how those two are.
Right. Well,
it doesn't always feel so good, but they get the job done.
Right. And what we've been perceiving with Mars in the Libra overtone, like the whole entire 25-month cycle, is working with the masculine experience of Libra, of conscious equal partnership. How does the masculine principle unite and honor and come together with the feminine principle, and to create that experience? And with Saturn having been there as well, helping to restructure how we perceive ourselves in relationship, masculine and feminine relationship, but to all of our relationships. It's not just masculine and feminine relationships. It does include all of them. But since we're looking at Venus and Mars right now, we're kind of focused a little bit on how they come together in relating. And there's been a lot of wounding and a lot of challenges around that. So we're, in a sense, it's like, how do we dismantle those old patriarchal forms of relating that hasn't really served either, ultimately, and doesn't allow them to be fully who they are.
Interesting that the North Node's been in Libra, which is about relationships, ruled by Venus. And now it's moving into Virgo, which is where they will, Venus is retrograde when she has the seed point here in just on the 31st of August.
Right.
So that's when they touch, and it's unusual for them to join together twice.
Right.
It's kind of a rare event. So it's just interesting that here the North Node is getting ready to move into Virgo, and we have this double seeding that's happened, and they're gonna touch again November 2nd, if I have the date right. So it's just kind of interesting, the whole orchestration.
Yes, and if you consider that the North Node only goes into Virgo every 19 years, and we're looking at, the 15-year Mars pattern, and we're looking at the 8-year Venus pattern, and then we're looking at Venus and Mars together every 32 years, and that they're coming together in Leo and then Virgo, and the North Node will be in Virgo, and it's like, so how rare is it that all these cycles will come well, we know Venus and Mars will come together in this pattern every 32 years, but the North Node's not necessarily going to be there, and Jupiter's also in Virgo. So, right. So that,
I mean, it's an interesting confluence of energies, no doubt about it. So it just, it feels a very positive thing to me, that it is, there are things being orchestrated.
The divine orchestration. Yeah. Right. So I just wanted to show this little pattern of how Venus and Mars, if you put their patterns together, and this would be tracking 7 orbits of Mars or 15 years, over 15 years, this is how Venus and Mars, their pattern looks together. I thought that was fascinating to see the sacred geometry of that.
Very interesting.
Yeah, and I just wanted to, so we'll speak a bit about the 3 distinct patterns of how Venus and Mars come together every 6.5 years. So the current pattern is the one that we connect to the story of Inanna and Dumuzi. I'll share a little bit more about that in a moment, or the story of Rapunzel. There's also and this pattern is where there is a short meeting in the evening sky, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this as we go through. And then there's the long meeting in the morning sky that's almost 4 months, and then there is 4 months, and the evening sky meeting was like 2 or 3 weeks, I think, and there was only one exact conjunction, and then they separated. And that really connects beautifully into the story of Rapunzel, as we will see. So the information that comes for our understanding of how Venus and Mars is the story of Rapunzel was something that was written about by William Irwin Thompson, who wrote the book, The Time When Fallen Bodies Take to Light. He also wrote this article, The Imaginary Making Worlds of Myth and Science, The Imaginary Landscape Making Worlds of Myth and Science. And that's where this information is coming from. So if anybody wants to see if they can find that and read that, it's pretty fascinating what he...
It's interesting, the work, Rudolf Steiner did a lot of work like what you're talking about. He had a lot of understanding about the sacred geometry and working in landscapes and flow and
he did, and he had an amazing understanding of things too. And what William Irwin Thompson has been looking into is how many of our mythic stories come to us as a cosmological telling, as a description of what's happening in the sky. And we're going to see how that happens with the Rapunzel story. So in the Rapunzel story, the main characters are the witch, represented by the moon, Rapunzel represented by Venus, and Mars represented prince represented by Mars. And so back in February, on the 20th of February, the moon, the crescent moon in the evening sky rose up and sort of between Venus and Mars. And in the story, what happens is Rapunzel, who is, you know, having this little affair with the prince, and she's been kept in a tower by the witch who wants to keep her away from romantic love and having you know, the kind of experience. It's more of a matriarchal thing. Like she wants to keep this Rapunzel away from that experience, but she winds up having the experience anyway. And the witch finds out, and basically she casts the prince out of the tower. When she finds out, she cuts off Rapunzel's hair so he can't get up, or nobody can come up that way without her knowing. And then she uses the hair to put down the tower, so he climbs up. And when he climbs up, he encounters the witch. And she pushes them out the window, and he falls into the bushes, the thorns below, and it blinds him. And this is basically symbolic of him now traveling through the underworld. And so on April 17th of 2015, Mars disappeared into the underworld, became so close to the sun, was not able to be seen anymore, and was in the underworld for several months until August 5th of 2015. And so in the story, what happens is that Rapunzel's also cast out into the wilderness, and she's wandering in the wilderness, and then at some point they come and they reunite. He hears her voice or hears her singing, and then she sees him and she runs to him and holds him, and her tears fall upon his eyes. His blindness is healed, and they're reunited. And that's what's happening in the story right now. So Venus and Mars are reuniting August 31st exact and November 2nd, but they're already within 10 degrees of each other. Yeah, and will be until November 22nd, be within 10 degrees. So anyway, so we can look at this story, and what happened was that on February 20th, the moon was with Venus at 0 Aries and 10 minutes, and then with Mars at 0 Aries. Venus and Mars were exact on February 21st. So this is the part of the story where the moon as the witch is finding out and figuring out what's going on, and is going to separate Venus and Mars. So Venus then continues her evening sky journey, and Mars goes into the underworld, is cast out into the underworld, blind. And so so we have image here of Rapunzel. Some of the stories say she goes wandering through the desert or through the wilderness, and the prince wanders blind in the underworld. But what we were imagining was that at this point in February, when the two came together, at close to the equinox point, right, the 0 Aries point, there was a conception that took place. And the way the story ends with Rapunzel is when they get back together, she has given birth to twins, a boy and a girl. And so when they're reunited, they're also reunited with the twins. And in the story, they say that, you know, once the prince is able to see, he takes Rapunzel back to his kingdom, and they're welcomed, and, you know, they've given birth. They have this boy-girl twins, and we could imagine that they've given birth to the new masculine and the new feminine. And that it actually turns out that from February, when the time they were together, to November is 9 months, a gestation point. So so we've been imagining what, you know, how this has been, that we've been gestating this birth of the new masculine and the new feminine. So from August 22nd to November 22nd, Venus and Mars are within 10 degrees. And they're two exact meetings. And interestingly, their meeting on August 31st is at almost exactly 15 degrees Leo. And we know that 15 degrees Leo is the cross quarter point, the point where the sun has reached the exact halfway point between the June solstice and the September equinox. And so those cross quarter points are highly significant as well. And the Celts saw those cross quarter points as an in-between time, like, you know, when we can access divination, we can access, you know, psychic intuitive experiences. We can, you know, there's that time where we can have an experience that is sort of in between one reality and another. which is kind of cool. And their second coming together is close to the November cross quarter. They're coming together at 24 Virgo, but the cross quarter actually happens on November 7th when the sun reaches 15 degrees Scorpio. So the cross quarter energy seems to be present with this. They're coming together. So is there any questions you have so far, Katie?
Well, I think it's interesting. I can't remember the, wasn't, I can't recall exactly, but I know Jupiter, wasn't it conjunct the Leo new moon, and wasn't that near that 14, the cross quarter point?
Just a few days
that
ago.
happened. Well, I know it happened on August 14th, the Leo new moon. I can't remember the degree it happened at, but wasn't it conjunct Jupiter?
It was later degrees. Yeah, and Jupiter's actually in this story because it's not exact, but in November 2nd, Jupiter's like right there with, really close to them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting that Jupiter is involved in this whole, because that expands the energy, that brings good fortune and blessings to this reunion and this, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jupiter did go into Virgo on the 11th of August, but is so close to the sun, is not visible now and won't be visible until like the 10th of September, re-emerging into the morning sky. And that's the actual first time the moon and Venus meet in this new Venus cycle, where as she's beginning her descent into the underworld, connecting to the story of Inanna. And as Venus goes into the underworld, she has to go through the 7 gates, and at each gate they ask her to give up one of her vestments. She's dressed up in her ceremonial regalia, and so at the first gate she gives up her crown. And that'll be happening on September 10th, at the same time that Jupiter is re-entering the morning sky.
And Saturn goes direct.
Yes.
And goes into Sagittarius, not direct, goes into Sagittarius.
Right close to that date.
Yeah.
It's not exact on that date, but I think it's really close to that date.
Yeah,
it's pretty amazing what's happening.
A lot of completion, a lot of everything's sort of coming together, these reunions, the completion of all the purification and
yes. So for people who are inclined to be up early in the morning on August 31st, or you can even be starting to see that now if you get clear skies. I haven't been in a place where clear skies are yet, so I haven't had a chance to see Venus and Mars. But on the 31st, they're going to be kind of side by side here. And they're, this is the head of the lion, where they're going to be meeting sort of between the lion and the crab, the way it's drawn on this particular star map. And the other thing that's really fascinating is to see how in the sky, also in the morning sky, you'll be seeing something called Heaven's Gate. There's the constellation of Orion, and then Heaven's Gate. Betelgeuse is the arm of Orion, sometimes called the armpit. Procyon is in the constellation of Canis Minor, the small dog, and is connected to the ship Argo from Jason and the Argonauts and the quest for the Golden Fleece. And then Sirius, the Canis Major, this forms a perfect triangle in the sky. And then the blue line that's coming through this triangle of the Heaven's Gate is the center line it's the plane of the galaxy. And so many ancients saw this as the entrance point here underneath the twins, the gateway, entrance point into this reality between the twins and Orion and so on. So Mars and Venus, even though they're not zodiacally in the same sign, they're just kind of interesting to note that they're in this part of the sky. With that asterism, Heaven's Gate, one of my favorite. It's very easy to spot, and when you see it in the sky, it does look like a perfect equilateral triangle as well. And Venus, of course, will be very, very bright, impossible to miss if you have clear skies, and Mars, a little bit dimmer and off to the left of where Venus is if you're looking east before the sun rises on August 31st. And then on November 2nd, you can see how far, because Venus and Mars met between the crab and the lion, according to the star map. And then you can also see Jupiter has joined, is pretty close to them at their conjunction in November. And they're at the head of the Virgin Priestess and the tail of the lion. And in fact, I think 23-degree Virgo is aligned with a star called the Nebula, which is the tail of the lion, and an important star in the sky. So this conjunction, this second union, exact union, because they're staying within 10 degrees the whole entire time, and they don't separate from that 10-degree point until the 22nd of November. So their union, this is a long union.
Yeah, and 10 is the number of instant manifestation.
I love it. And the reason we use the 10-degree orb is because that's what the ancients used. If you take your fist and put it straight, you straighten your arm and you make a fist, you can line it up with Venus and Mars. You can put one on one side and one on the other. Within 10, if they're within 10 degrees, they will touch either side of your fist. And so that's a 10-degree marker, one way to mark the 10 degrees. And so that's how the ancients, that's something they considered should still be a conjunction. Like they're really close. They're so close together that it's not, even though they're not an exact conjunction, it's considered a conjunction for the whole time. And then we see, of course, the moon in this slide is getting ready to come along and catch up in the next couple of days. We'll catch up with all of that after November 2nd. So so something to,
which is, if you're looking back at that Rapunzel story, is kind of interesting that, the moon catches up and
right, while they're still united.
Yes, exactly. Right. Because there's almost like a witnessing, a
blessing, perhaps. And
I mean, she finally, what I'm saying, the moon sort of,
right,
like blessing the union after all. It wasn't,
right.
Yeah.
But both Jupiter,
they passed that test. I feel like, in a way,
right.
The moon does represent, a lot of what's hidden, that we go through a lot of testing from these things, our instincts, things that are hidden within us, our own dark emotional needs that are unexpressed.
Right.
And the lovers actually help bring this into the light.
And this is also,
will she be at? Where will the moon be at? Will she be in a waxing phase, or what phase?
It's a waning moon, because it's in the morning sky. The moon is always in her waning phase. And so there's that aspect of the, having been through the whole journey, the moon is getting ready to go to a new point. So there's a wisdom aspect that's connected to the waning moon. Connecting to the grandmothers, and the blessed, she has this ability.
And the most receptive. I feel the moon is her most receptive when she's
at that time
waning. She's really receiving,
right?
And there's an acceptance there,
right?
Surrender and acceptance.
Yes. Yeah. And then and we can see Heaven's Gate is still in the sky, even though Jupiter and Venus and Mars aren't as close to that part of the sky. And of course, now they've all passed Regulus. They're and that's one of the things that happens between the first conjunction and the second conjunction, is that Venus and Mars will pass the heart star of the lion, and also that Sphinx point, the entrance point to the Hall of Records. Regulus was considered to be connected to that, one of the 4 royal stars of ancient times.
And Raphael, the main healing angel.
Yes. Yeah, so lots of alchemy and magic connected to that star Regulus, which has been a major player in this, as because Jupiter was with Regulus as it went into Virgo in early August.
And Venus touched Regulus at her retrograde.
And 3 times she's touching Regulus, right? So when she goes direct, she's done it already twice, and then when she goes direct, she'll come back one more time. And Mars is still yet to pass Regulus, and that will happen in this time period as well. So it's really exciting.
And when she passes, is Saturn already in Sag?
Saturn goes into Sagittarius, I think, on I want to say September 24th. I don't have my book right in front of me.
I think it's the 11th of September is when.
Or maybe it's the 11th. Yeah. Something happens on the 24th. Oh, it's Pluto stationing. I'm sorry, Pluto stationing on the 24th.
Yes.
And then Mercury's going to go retrograde too. So we've got a lot of activity happening and including the eclipses and everything else, which is a whole other conversation. But September is going to be a powerful month, and including the fact that Venus and Mars with Jupiter are so
and the eclipses, and we have this final blood red moon
Right.
that lunar eclipse in Aries,
Right.
conjunct the South Node. I mean, there's
Yes. And what's really interesting too about that eclipse, because I mentioned that Venus and Mars came together in February of 2015 in the evening sky at 0 or 1 degree Aries, and that eclipse is happening around 4 degrees Aries, so really close to where their conjunction was as well. So, you know, what is being activated by, you know, one of the things I like to say about an eclipse is that it's accelerating our experience from a full cycle of the moon. So we go from a full moon back, you know, back through all the phases of the moon, back to a full moon in about 3 hours. It's, you know, and it usually takes about 30 days. So it really is accelerating something when there's an eclipse happening. So very, very interesting that it's also happening so close to the degree where Venus and Mars met back in
well,
February.
it's interesting. Have you heard of the Schumann resonance, the frequency that the
Yes.
planet resonates at typically? I understand that it's beginning to accelerate. The frequency is going up
Right.
pretty quickly.
Yes. Yeah.
So, you know, and when you ask, you know, you have to ask what's being activated. I think you have to ask what's not being activated.
Right.
I mean, just it's
well said.
you know, it's like ping balls. You know, it's
Yeah.
you know, that wizard, the alchemist.
Right.
Just so
Yes.
much.
Alchemy is the key here. Totally, it's all about alchemy. So what I came up with some questions. We did this. We did a Venus Mars webinar for the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School. And if people are interested in getting more details of this, because we've just kind of covered it fairly quickly here, you can check out that. Go to shamanicastrology.com and click on the teleclass series, and you can find access to that or the sign up to get that webinar. But we did a little visualization, and one of the things I did was ask these questions about how these energies of the divine feminine and divine masculine are showing up for you, because this really is a sacred union that happens within us first. Not, you know, it's not just what's happening externally, but it's the reflection in the mirror to us of what's happening internally. So if you tune into that, it's like, how are they having a conversation? How are they relating to one another? How are they working together? And we've got Venus in Leo, the Leo overtone now, and she's also in the sign of Leo, but her, you know, she's doing her journey as the divine sovereign queen to reclaim, you know, her position as the divine sovereign queen with self-love, radical radiant self-love. And Mars is really still in his journey to figure out how to do conscious equal partnership and honor the feminine in her sovereignty as well, and as well as the masculine honoring, you know, its own self and its sovereignty. So you can ask and tune in and see if, does one of them have a stronger voice? Are you more attuned to your feminine voice or your masculine voice? And if so, then, you know, what could you do to help the other voice to become stronger within you? And then you can also ask if they're working harmoniously together within you. And if they're not, then what would you need to do in order to create greater harmony between the masculine and feminine that is within you? And we all have it, whether we're women or men. We all have that feminine, masculine energy that's going on within us. And when we do the sacred marriage work with that part of ourselves, then we're actually able to show up in healthier ways for experiencing conscious equal partnership and fulfilling relationships and so on, whether that's, you know, whatever kind of relationship we want to be in. And then another question was, what is the strength of your commitment to developing both the feminine and masculine energy in their whole and sovereign expression within you? So this, and you actually could probably just work with this question. I think it's a really great one because it kind of covers the other three questions that we just looked at. And you might ask how this can give you access to creative powers you've never before imagined. And, you know, we can see this little image of perhaps it's Adam and Eve standing side by side in the, you know, in the garden, in that place of, you know, how do we return to our understanding of how we are co-creating our reality, and we can co-create a new earth that is coming back to the garden of earthly delight. That's really the intention, or that I am energizing, and I feel would be really great that if there were a lot of us energizing that intention as well, because the more we have people energizing that, you know, it increases that, the possibility of that happening exponentially. So any questions about that, KG? Or
No,
comment?
I love that. I feel that Venus and Mars are very much involved. You know, those are personal energies, very involved in the creative process, and we are all creative by nature. We're inborn creators. We're always creating. We're really, our life is our work of art.
Yes, and when we have that divine feminine and divine masculine energy working together within us, then we can create in ways we can't even necessarily imagine beyond what we've ever done before, which is kind of exciting to think about. So definitely something we would, the benefits.
I think generally the feminine aspect, maybe I say this because of my own, you know, I'm a doer. I love to be really doing things and be active. But, you know, I do have a commitment to to having regular time where I'm in meditation, I'm receiving, and I'm practicing listening. Because it's really the listening. I mean, you really need more time listening and being receptive and being in that place where you're energizing your power to attract things to you, to have the fulfillment of what it is, you know, your intentions and what you've activated. You also need to give space for things to show up, and you're not always doing.
Right.
So that you're actually, you know, you push things away when you're too much, you know.
Yes.
You know, it's like then you start feeling like you're chasing after, because you're not getting the, you know, you want the response to be, you know,
right.
And you have to give space, have the patience to allow yourself the space for things to respond to you, because you're in a co-creation. It's not just about you. There's a whole synchrony of things happening, and it's divine timing that's orchestrating things. It's not just your timing and how that you want things right now.
Right, and that you're bringing up a really interesting point, because there are aspects of the feminine that we would refer to as solar feminine, which are more active, more seemingly yang energy, active energy, and there's aspects of the masculine that are more yin kind of energy. So, so they can have both. It's not just, you know, we're not separating it out as to say, you know, masculine active, feminine receptive. There's qualities of both. And interestingly, Venus, having just you know, started her new cycle in Leo, is very solar feminine and connects to the goddess Sekhmet, you know, and to very fierce and amazing energy that is, you know, how is the feminine actively helping to create alchemy? You know, that's what Sekhmet's job was, is to right the imbalance in the world. So, and she's actively about doing that. And then, you know, and the masculine in Libra is more about how to be. It's a little bit more of a, you know, how to be in relationship and notice, and, you know, it seems a little bit more receptive in a sense. So it's kind of almost like what we would consider in our understanding of masculine and feminine as a role reversal, but actually it's just because we got very tight definitions of what masculine and feminine are, or have been in our culture. Just so it's just interesting to consider.
Yeah, good point. I mean, Libra does rule the military. So it's
yeah,
pretty forceful. I've heard it said, you know, Libra is like the iron fist and the velvet glove. You know, they come across all gracious and refined and really know how to, you know, schmooze and stuff like that. But they really have this, you know,
yeah,
very set. They can be kind of controlling. You know, I mean, it's.
Well, yeah, I mean, it
is, you know, all those cardinal signs are controlling.
Yeah, there's a shadow side to every archetype. So, yeah. and you know, subtle manipulative ways that can happen, or more overt and plainly out open. You know, so yeah, definitely. But what we want to probably do here is really imagine how these energies can come together in their highest, most divine expression. So I came up with this imagery that I'm working with, and that is to imagine a fully empowered masculine Mars joining in sacred union with a fully empowered feminine Venus as they meet in a happily ever after encounter of Hyros Gamos, or sacred marriage, which is really the symbol of Venus and Mars being together in the sky for such a long time. It really is that sacred marriage, sacred union, our Hyros Gamos expression, and that they're each ready to meet the other in all the ways they want and need to be met, further empowering their co-creative union, giving birth to the twins, or the new feminine and the new masculine, dedicated to collaborating in the sacred work to assist Gaia in her ascension.
Yeah, so, the image I had right away was that yin-yang symbol, you know, where both has a little bit of the other.
Yeah. Yes.
In the symbol.
Right. Yeah. So this is something that people can work with, and you know, over the next 4 months. And I would, you know, if you can create that as a daily intention or something to meditate on, to journey on, to ask, you know, your guides for assistance and help in how do you create this for yourself? How do you, you know, with that intention, and all we really need is the intention, and everything else will pretty much fall into place. There's one little small piece to know is that anything that is not aligned with that attention will come up to get cleared. And I know, PG, you've been having this experience, and I have too, where it's like some crazy things happening that give us the opportunity to see where we still have our own stuff to work through and clear and let go of and release and surrender to, or whatever it is that we need to do, so that it's not the thing that's driving us, because it's unconscious. So, yeah.
Yeah, the inside comes out.
Right. So I just wanted to, we're kind of at the end here, but if you're interested in doing the Venus journey as a ceremony and working with each of her gates over the next either 9 months or 18, almost 19 months, we are doing a teleclass series, Venus Alchemy, at venusalchemy.com. It's been phenomenal. We have a lot of people who've already joined the class. We'll be having our first class on September 7th. And there's still an early registration special that goes until September 6th. So you can go check that out. And then just some additional resources for people. And I already mentioned this, the Sacred Union of Venus and Mars in the Morning Skies and their sagas, or sagas meaning epic stories. And that was the webinar that we just did last weekend. So that goes into more detail about all of this and speculation about what it means and how we can work with it. And there's a little guided meditation and so on. You can do that. And then also some articles that Tammy and I have been writing at venusalchemy.com. If you go to the articles section, there's an article on reclaiming the divine sovereign queen, Leo, Venus and Leo. And there's a picture of Sekhmet here, who wears the solar disc on her head. She is a solar goddess. There's a little article on Sekhmet returning and then igniting feminine leadership through the new Leo cycle, which is really amazing. Tammy has done a lot of research on men and women who were born into this Venus cycle, and how they, you know, they're leaders in their own way, and well-known people that I'm trying to remember, like who some of them are. Well, Marianne Williamson is one. She wrote her book, A Return to Love, in her age 40 Venus return in this Venus overtone. I think Clarissa Pincole Estes wrote Women Who Run with the Wolves in her Leo Venus overtone return. She's got that same cycle. So there's lots of people, and it's just a great way to get additional information and so on. And so those articles are available on venusalchemy.com. And then if anybody wants to know more about celestial timings, I'm actually going to give away the September timings. So you can go to my website, Cayelincastell.com or celestialtimings.com, and that'll be posted in the next few days, access to the September timings. And there's a lot on this upcoming total lunar eclipse, Venus stationing direct, Mercury stationing retrograde. There's so much happening this month. This would be worth it if you're interested in finding out more. So that's all I have.
All right. Well, is it okay if I ask another question?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Could you speak a little bit about the Dumuzi story, Inanna and Dumuzi?
Yeah.
I know that's a love story. Could you speak just a little bit about that particular story?
Well, what's interesting is that, okay, so when Inanna goes to the underworld, she hears the call to go to the underworld. So she's choosing to go. She's not forced to go to the underworld. And then she makes the descent through the 7 gates. She dies. She's reborn. She dies to who she believes herself to be, is reborn, comes back up out of the underworld. And in the process of coming back up, she has to choose someone to take her place. This is part of the story. So when she gets back to the evening sky, so this is how it fits into what happened in this particular cycle. When she gets back to the evening sky and she sees Dumuzi sitting on her throne, and he hasn't been worried or concerned about her. He's just like having a good time. And she's like, okay, your turn to go. You go get initiated. You go to the underworld. And of course, in the story, he tries to get out of it. He runs, and the creatures that came with her, that are supposed to take the person back that she chooses to go back, has to chase him down, and they take him into the underworld. So he doesn't go into the underworld right away. And as you remember, the moon conjuncted Mars in February, and Mars didn't go into the underworld until April. So it took him a while to find him and take him down into the underworld. And then he gets initiated there, and then he comes back up out of the underworld. And there's not a lot that has been written about when he comes back as the initiated masculine. There's a lot about their love story prior to her going into the underworld, and their lovers, and it goes on and on in the Sumerian texts. But there's not a lot that really describes what happens after he comes back and they meet in the morning sky. As after now they're both fully been through the underworld initiation process. So we are kind of dreaming into that. What is that? What does that look like? What does that mean? And so kind of what I was saying in terms of now, how does the fully initiated masculine meet with the fully initiated feminine in conscious equal partnership as co-creative partners? That is really, I think, the intention, and maybe we lost that part of the story, but I think that's how the story would end.
Well, that's a good point. I think we have lost that part of the story. And now we need to reactivate it. We need to live into it in where we are now.
Yes.
What that feels like, what that looks like. It's interesting to see your background there. It's like I see 3 doors. There's a lot of comings and goings with you right now. That's when I saw that right away. It was like, okay, she's doing, look, all 3 doors there,
Right. Yes,
and a lot of choices, a lot of, a lot of decisions to be made.
Either, so that's part of the normal place.
Oh yeah, that's right. You're
I'm in New Mexico.
Yeah, you're getting ready for
going to the Sekhmet temple.
Yeah. So tell us about the Sekhmet temple and what your journey's about and what you plan to do there. And
so we are, so the Sekhmet temple is in Nevada. So it's a little bit of a drive from where I am, but we're going to greet Venus and Mars in the morning sky there, and the full moon, which is this weekend, the Pisces full moon. And we'll be doing ceremony in honor of that, in honor of Sekhmet. And part of, expanding our understanding of the Sekhmet story, because basically her story is that Ra sends her to Earth to straighten people out because they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. They've gotten out of balance. And so, and then she just starts killing off everybody. And then Ra's like, oops, maybe she's like going, she's berserker energy. They can't stop her. They can't get her to come off, to stop killing people. So they get her drunk with beer that's got pomegranate juice that looks like blood. And I've also read versions that says it has mandrake root in it and stuff. Anyway, so she winds up passing out. And then when she wakes up, there's different versions of the story. She's either becomes Hathor, the goddess Hathor, or she meets her beloved Ptah, which is, I kind of think, similar to this, this Venus-Mars dance. And then then together they have the divine child, Nefertum, who is a healer. And actually Sekhmet is also a healer as well. And so Nefertum is the Egyptian version of Asclepius, who had the healing temples in Greece. And, that's where you would go to dream. And then when you would have the dreams, they would know how to help you get better, to help you heal. And so working with the dream energy and that sort of thing. So we'll be working a lot with that in this Venus cycle as working with Sekhmet, and I feel like her job is really to devour the negativity and to right the balance. And she upholds the law of Ma'at, the goddess Ma'at, who is about the balance of justice, what is just and what is imbalance, kind of thing. So she's fierce, but she's also she also has a lot of compassion, and kind of not unlike Kali, who's seen as this fierce, devouring, killing goddess, but really has a very important function to play, because we need to digest and to consume and digest and transform the negativity, and that's working with the alchemy. It's not like how do you get rid of it, it's like how do you transform it, how do you digest it and put it into the cauldron, and that's what Sekhmet is all about. So we're going to be going and working with her very directly, so we can bring her alchemy into this Venus cycle. So I'm very excited. It'll be fun.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful.
Yeah. So are there any other questions or anything?
Let me think. Did I have anything else I wanted to ask about? One of the things I would like to ask about, this is off topic, but it's a whole other different topic, but I'm very interested. We are at the end. We've now passed the square, this last square between Jupiter and Saturn. And Jupiter and Saturn are so important for building up, for structuring society, for expansion in society. They're the social planets, and they have a lot to do with how things show up and how they look out here. And so we're in this closing cycle. This is a 20-year cycle. I know when they seed, it takes about 20 years between when Jupiter conjuncts Saturn and then they come back. We're in this closing square now. So what are you seeing with this particular closing square between Jupiter and Saturn? What have you thought about that? Or?
Well, what's interesting is that if we think about Saturn as structure and form, and it also kind of represents limitations and boundaries, and how we sort of function in this reality. We live in a middle world, terrestrial world kind of reality, and both Jupiter and Saturn are operating in this reality. Jupiter is the principle of expansion. Saturn's kind of the principle of contraction. You can have too much contraction, you can have too much expansion. But actually, when Jupiter and Saturn work together, they create a balance so that you can actually get things done in the middle world. So perhaps that's the way that we can work with that energy. Virgo is all about the sacred work. How do we honor life as sacred? How do we engage in a sacred relationship with the earth and the sky and the timings that are happening, and doing the ceremonies at the solstices and equinoxes and the sunrises and the sunsets and the Venus-Mars conjunctions and the whatever things that is, so that we are showing up to inform the mysteries. They're informing us, they're telling us what time it is, and then we can set our intentions and how we're going to engage with those mysteries. And so the Saturn-Jupiter dance really helps us to see that we are in a time when we can really create, bringing a lot of new form into this reality, so that we're honoring the earth as sacred, we're honoring the sacred timings, we're honoring our relationship with it and our co-creative time, how we are being co-creators with this energy, and that it can be actually something practical in the middle world. Something that can be functional, sustainable, effective, really works for everybody, not just a few people. And with Saturn and Sagittarius, it's really about that quest for truth and enlightenment and meaning, and that whole thing. So how do we bring a more enlightened consciousness to what it is that we're creating?
Yeah. So I definitely see the holism. That's the word that comes to me is Jupiter. Really, especially opposite to Neptune.
Yes.
And Pisces, that axis, the Virgo Pisces axis is very much the mind body. There's a holism there that I see. There's with bringing more holistic methods, alternative methods into the hospitals, into working with prisoners, into working with people who are psychologically, emotionally imbalanced. you know, it's bringing that, you know, there's illumination there, there's, you know, so, and the Virgo, you know, that's the original healer. So there is more of I feel there's an integration there. And then with Saturn in Sagittarius, you know, it is, you know, restructuring your beliefs. I mean, I think beliefs, you know, the lie is right at the heart of beliefs. So I think that there can be, you know, beliefs for me are like training wheels. They're there to help you for a time until you can have this direct knowing, this direct experience of truth.
Right.
And then you drop the training wheels. You take responsibility for your perceptions, and you know, you can access the wisdom, you know, that Sagittarius, the wisdom, truth, directly. And so there's a structure there, you know, I don't know what that looks like, but it seems like there's that whole thing is up for restructuring, you know, and especially Neptune moving through its own sign, Pisces, before it reaches Aries. So it's like this, I feel like that we're done with the whole patriarchy.
I would agree. Yeah. And, you know, and the other thing to also keep in mind is that the truth that we perceive, how we perceive the truth, and maybe beliefs is another way to say that, it's always growing, evolving, and changing as our perception.
Exactly, because how you believe, whatever you're, you know, it filters out. But of course, you can't have everything coming in. You've got to, you know, you've got to have, you know, structure. If everything's there, you know, you've got to have contrast. You got to have structure. So
what is the new truth that is helping us to create the reality that is going to help us to be in a more enlightened place with how we are perceiving and interacting with our reality and co-creating with great mystery and, you know, for ourselves personally, but also planetarily. So yeah, it's pretty exciting.
And what works at one stage in our evolution is not going to work in another stage.
Right.
You know, it's just not. And so then you're always evolving.
Always.
You know, and it's not like a right, wrong thing ultimately. You know, it's an evolutionary process. And having the wisdom to recognize, well, this old system, this old structure, it worked at one time and it's not going to. We can't keep doing it the way we've been doing it and be successful in our future.
Right.
So,
exactly.
So
time for a new form, because the old one is no longer sustainable.
Yes. But I do think holism, having a holistic, how everything's connected, I think that awareness is going to be very instrumental in whatever it is we do, the new structures we bring in for ourselves. Do you know exactly what degree and what year is still, I haven't looked that far ahead. When are they going to conjunct? When do they have this new seed point between Jupiter and...
I think it's in 2020, and I looked at it once, and I'm not remembering exactly where that's happening. You know, what signs it's
what degree? Is it in Capricorn?
I think it is.
Yeah, because Pluto's just going to leave Capricorn in 2020. I think it is. So it will be in those last, more near the, certainly in more, I consider those last 10 degrees from 20 to 30. That's more mastery level where you're really coming more into, you're completing that whole, you know, cycle of whatever that work was by whatever planet, God, however you want to see those forces.
Right.
But those teachers that have been working. So yeah, I think that's, you know, and I want to even take a leap ahead. I want to see, I was just looking ahead at 2025 when, I think it's 2025 actually, when Pluto moves into Aquarius, Neptune moves into Aries, and Uranus moves into Gemini in 2025. So
it's not that far away.
It's not that far away. Things can happen and come up really. So I want to just kind of, I've been thinking I would do a forecast for 2025. What 2025, that might be kind of an interesting show to do with you. You know, what's the vision, you know, with these things, if we were to imagine into it, you know, with where we're at now, what will we have created? What are some of the things, you know, having a imagination, a positive imagination, you know, because we create, you know, by what we're imagining. And so often in the you know, we see these, you know, the negatives, you know, people have these negative stories about what's happening, but there's always a positive force working for good in everything. So I think to, you know, to give voice to these positive forces that are trying to work themselves out in our consciousness, you know, through time.
I would like to see what you have to say about that. That would be awesome.
That would be, I think that would be kind of a fun thing. I was thinking doing it myself, but I think it would be good to have a collaborative
thing. Sure.
Yeah. What would want to dream itself up through us? Just
yes, absolutely. Yeah. That's what we do. We're dreaming into it all the time.
Yes. Yes. We're informing as well as being informed.
Indeed.
Absolutely. So,
yeah.
Well, wonderful to be with you today, as always. I really enjoyed it. So thanks so much for joining us for this special episode about the Venus return and reconnection with her lover Mars. My next Conversations to Enlighten and Heal webinar show is on Wednesday, July 29th. I actually have another one scheduled on September 23rd with Mo Abdel-Baki. But I also have one on July 11th with my friend Eldon Taylor, who's a New York Times bestselling author. He's got a new book coming out called Gotcha, and it really shines a light on a lot of things that are going on that are below our consciousness that I think would be helpful for us to know about. So anyway, I'm looking forward to both of those. Mo will talk about the eclipse cycle that's happening from the Vedic astrology and his tarot perspective. So have a beautiful day, everyone, or mahalo. Much love to you. Wishing you happy days always. Thanks again, Cayelin. It's been such a pleasure having you with us.
My pleasure, too. Thank you for having me.
And enjoy your time at Sekhmet Temple. I want to hear about it. So
I'll let you know.
Yeah. So until next time, relax, enjoy your life, and stay connected.